Thank you so much for joining us on ADHD Wise Podcast. If something in this episode has helped you, made you think, or given you language for something you've been living with, you can support the podcast by following or subscribing, leaving a review, or connecting with ADHD Wise on YouTube, TikTok, LinkedIn, and Facebook. Every share, review, comment, and follow helps the podcast reach more people and helps us create conversations and resources that support neurodivergent people, families, and professionals. Thank you. Your support really does mean the world. Welcome to ADHD Wise Podcast. I'm Jannine Perryman, and this is a space for open conversations about ADHD and neurodiversity, bringing together lived experience, professional insights, and the questions that help us move forward. Wherever you are in your journey, you are welcome here. Hello, and thank you for joining ADHD Wise Podcast. My name is Jannine, and today I am going to wrap up Season 1 with a look back across the episodes so far and the people that we've had on here to speak to you. And also I want to draw on an episode of ADHD Chatter that I did with Alex Partridge. My episode is episode 35 of ADHD Chatter. We'll put a link to that in the bio of this recording. Okay, so one of the loneliest things about being neurodivergent is believing that your struggles are your own and they are somehow novel to you and other people are not experiencing the same thing the same way. And that's true because everybody does experience things differently. So that's always true. But there's also a commonality in our experiences that I think is worth exploring. We can feel like everybody else has worked out how to be a person while we are still struggling to do the things that appear to come naturally to everybody else. And that can be the case, even if they are the same neurotype as us, because everybody's neurotype is actually different, because our brains are as unique as our fingerprints. When neurodivergent people talk openly and honestly about their lives, we're hearing similar experiences echoed across those different voices. There are different neurotypes, different conditions that overplay with everybody's neuroexpression, and I wanted to share with you this commonality of voices to sort of pull those voices together to give you a really the hopefully diverse way of looking at things, but also with that commonality in mind. In truth, ADHD is hard. This is a hard life to live. Being different to the majority of the population, to the way the rest of the world seems to operate, is incredibly challenging, and you are not imagining it. Okay, so I want to begin with sharing the extract from the ADHD Chatter podcast, episode 35. Full credit to ADHD Chatter. This is theirs. I recorded it with them. So full credit to them, including that in the bio. Have a listen to this.
When we're in the zone, we are giving our all. We don't moderate that very well. Neurotypicals typically don't find things as difficult as we do. So, for example, we receive an email and we have to respond to it. Right? We think about that email or we get annoyed by that email. We're emotionally dysregulated, so we might be more emotional than other people about it. We don't know what information to put in and what to keep out. We're trying to moderate all of those things. So just an email it can be more difficult for us to contend with, especially if it's coming at a time when we were supposed to be working on something else and it's distracted us from that. And then we've got to get back to the thing that we were supposed to be doing because we were distracted by this email. So if emails take you off track, if a phone call takes you off track, getting back to where you were is more exhausting.
An email can seem like a small thing until it isn't. The difficulty is not always visible in the task itself. It's everything in our brains that's going on around it. It's the stopping, the switching, the processing, the managing of our emotional responses, working out what is being asked, deciding how to respond, decoding what the nuance might be in the middle of all of that, and then trying to find our way back to whatever it was we were doing before the interruption. And that invisible activity can create extra workload for us, extra stress, extra effort, extra energy that can make us really, really tired. There is a relentlessness to this for us. Becca describes what that constant activity feels like inside her own brain, and this is from episode 6.
I feel like I have an extremely hyperactive brain, which is something I think a lot of people with ADHD, and maybe more so women with ADHD, will really relate to. It's just that it's unbearable. It's just constant. So I'm not medicated today. So it really is quite something. And I just feel like I constantly need to move, but I actually am often quite paralyzed physically because my brain's telling me to go physically do so many things at once that I actually can't move from the spot I'm rooted to. And then when I am up, it is non-stop. So I have POTS, which is a heart condition. So I'm not really meant to be stood for long periods of time. It makes me feel really poorly. But when I'm up, I just go. I go. It drives my partner nuts. Like a tornado ripping around the house, and yeah, it's like you're just so restless. But I am really restless, and I feel, or it's almost like guilt, but it's not quite guilt. But it's a similar feeling about being sat. Like I feel like I'm doing something wrong, and that there's something I should be doing. I always feel like I'm forgetting to be physically doing something, and so I'm always physically doing everything I can, and it's really hard.
For some people, it is a brain that never seems to stop. For some people, it's a brain that never seems to quite crank up the gears to where it's supposed to be. So even with ADHD as neurotype, there are variations within it. There is this feeling of things being amplified, our emotions, our thoughts and feelings being amplified. And the reactions that come from that are sometimes difficult for other people to understand. Vicky describes it as everything is times 10, and that is in episode 8.
I remember going for a walk with the dog one day and I thought, everything's like times 10. You can't just do a little bit, you've got to do a lot. It's really,
we don't regulate,
it can't
we
be
don't
like
moderate.
No. So, when I say to my clients, for example, thinking about this, if this was, I'm actually demonstrating, if we had 0 to 10.
If you're listening rather than watching, Vicky's got her hands like one hand down and one hand high. Yep, go on.
And it's like, if 0 is down here and 10 is up here, and 5 is in the middle, our let's say general neurotypical peers will exist on a scale of sort of like in between that 4 and 6, for example, in a wave format, for example. So they're existing in that. We exist between 0 and 10. And it goes up and it goes down. Yeah, and that dysregulation that we have, we don't have any control over. And there's a part of me that goes, I don't like saying neurotypical, because everybody is different and we all have different things going on in our lives. If we're talking about those that are not neurodivergent, they will generally be in a situation where their automatic functions of their brain will automatically say, go to the toilet, go get a drink, go and have a rest, have a cup of tea. That doesn't happen for us.
We're working to the extremes of things, and it will only be when life's for them. They're poorly and therefore they'll drop down, or something will happen and they've kind of got to the adrenaline pumps and they've got to go up. And those will be the times when people go up and down. Whereas us, we live in the ups and the downs, and we don't regulate, we don't moderate in the same way as our neurotypical peers.
I invite people to understand that this is not a choice. Because when we say we operate like this and what have you, this is not a choice. This is what is happening to us.
Neurodivergent is not a choice. ADHD is not a choice. That matters because neurodivergent differences are still so often interpreted as choices, failings, or behaviours that should simply be controlled. Those differences do not look the same. They may change with stress, tiredness, hormones, environment, and the demands being placed upon us. For Ryan, stress and tiredness can absolutely make his tics and Tourette's much more pronounced. This is Ryan in episode 12.
They come on very frequently when I'm very stressed or I'm tired. When I'm tired, they're terrible. And again, it's all to do with triggers. I know the triggers. So again, having the two conditions can sometimes, they sort of fight each other really and blend into one.
There is no single lived experience of neurodivergence. Even people who share the same diagnostics can experience it very, very differently. I'm just going to reiterate that again because I know I said it at the beginning. Our neurotypes interact with our bodies, our histories, our environment and our health, and the expectations placed upon us by others. As Darren explains, it's different for different people. This is Darren in episode 7.
And I think from a neurodivergent point of view, and what we spoke about in the chat about being authentic matters, you can be authentic and do it in such a way that you can limit your risk. There's always going to be a risk to someone by unveiling, by being courageous to just, as you know, we don't just have one mask and it's no mask, there's multiple. So even if you can work towards demanding a safe space because you have a right to a safe space, if you can have that space that's safe, whatever that is, and just start to lower one of the masks and just start to be a little bit more you, eventually that will become easier. And the reason that becomes easier, that I believe, once we start to unmask, others start to notice. And then when 2 people are unmasking, 3 will notice. And eventually, whilst trying to avoid the echo chamber elements of what a lot of people get caught in, rather than just hearing what you think you want to hear, you can experience it. And you said at the beginning, the moment that we live in is so special and it has to be now. And being brave enough, and because we do have multiple masks, dropping one doesn't necessarily kind of call you out, because there's always going to be one underneath.
The problem is that the world rarely makes room for that variation. It thinks it wants us all to be consistent so that it knows what to expect from us. But in reality, we are expected to perform consistently in environments that were not created with our brains and our bodies in mind. And when we cannot, we may blame ourselves, other people may blame us. We change jobs, we change schools, we change relationships, we change our routines. We're convinced that next time will be the time we finally manage to get it right. Joe described spending years hoping the next school would be different. So this is Joe in episode 2 talking about that.
I really struggled in almost every school I worked in to consistently perform in the way that it was expected. I don't know how many cycles of burnout I hit, but I hit burnout over and over and over again. And the last time that I hit burnout, I pulled myself out just before I hit rock bottom. And that gave me the space and the time to really reflect on what was causing it and where could I go from here. You know, I have an inherently strong sense of justice. And
Really? I haven't noticed.
and I really struggle when I feel that things are unfair, not just for me, but particularly, you know, for my team or the children that I was working with. And in advocating for people, I made myself incredibly unpopular over and over and over again. And I could never stay in a job longer than a couple of years. And every time I moved on, I sort of thought, oh, it would be better. It would be better. And I convinced myself that it would be better. And it never was. It never was.
And when the same struggle follows us from one place to another, it can become part of what we believe about ourselves. We can conclude that we are lazy, difficult, careless, over-emotional, or simply not good enough, when that is absolutely not the truth of the situation. Many of us learn to compensate by giving more, and then again more, and then more, when actually we need to try to do things differently. I'm going to pull on the episode 13 with Katie now, when she describes what happened for her.
As ADHDers, many of us grew up with carers, with teachers, with maybe our parents, with, I suppose now with childminders and nurseries, being told, no, that's wrong, that's naughty, you're not doing well enough, you're not listening. And part of us has learned that love is criticism, love is being told you're wrong, love is I'm just trying to think of the words, love is you're not doing well enough, you need to do better. And I think, again, that's something, I certainly did that in my marriage. I just kept trying to do better and better because nothing was good enough. And I tried and I gave more and I gave more and I gave more and I gave more and I gave more. And still more wasn't good enough.
Messages begin in childhood. Education has a narrow timetable of achievement. And if you weren't ready at that stage, you can feel like you're feeling very much left behind and everything else follows on from that thread. For a neurodivergent child who is struggling, that pressure can be enormous. I'm going to share with you something now from Louise Parker-Engels in episode 14.
My story was different in that I became very, very burnt out. So I was a teacher, I managed to get through university just about. I had to take a year off with glandular fever. And all the way through school, I had minor illnesses that just kept cropping up. And I look back now and I realise, and my doctor, when I was diagnosed with ADHD, said, you know, did you really have chronic fatigue syndrome all those years ago? Or was this a kind of a burnout? So I kept on going, and I did my degree, I did my A-levels, I did my GCSEs, did my A-levels, went to university, became a teacher, did some travelling abroad, some voluntary work abroad, and then crashed. And for most of my late 20s and all through my 30s, I was just not well. I was burnt out and not well. And that's the kind of thing that we want to be avoiding. But I think it's that pacing and that understanding of what our children need. And it's just so important, isn't it? So, you know, I was saying about my son who, you know, in the tribunal, his officer was saying, well, he's got to get up in the morning. You know, he most recently, he has been working as a chef nights and he does music production and works in a nightclub. So he's DJing and managing a nightclub. So, you know, there are so many ways into education. And as you say, it's just that pressure at the time that it feels like it's everything.
We have this history that we are contending with, that we have to try to change. And there's a big thing that I feel happens in our community where we all feel like we're supposed to give our child so much of a better childhood than the one we have. And I was talking to a client earlier on today, and I was saying to her, look, you know, the legacy that your parents gave you, you're probably not going to end in one generation. The idea is that you improve things and for your next generation, and the next generation improves things for the next generation. So improvement in the quality of life of our young people is supposed to improve with each generation. So don't feel like you've got to correct it all in the here and now. Sometimes we only recognise what happened to us when we see the same pattern appearing in our own children, and Michaela in episode 10 talks about that.
She was this typical tomboy, you know, she liked to play with her toys, but in a different way to what they should be played with. And she was really, really academically bright, and she didn't really have any sort of learning difficulties as such, but socially and emotionally and sensory wise, very, very tough. And as soon as I read that, I just thought, oh my gosh, all along, you know, from day one, this has been what's been going on for her, and nobody's realised this, not even I, because she was my first baby. I had nothing to compare it to. And then obviously later on, finding out that I had autism, I then was like, well, that's even more why I looked at her and thought, well, she's fine, because she was like me.
She's just my mini-me, which is what I did with my eldest. You may spend years, decades holding everything together until perimenopause changes the capacity and the strategies that you've relied on for the whole of your lives. I'm going to pass you to Nikki now in episode 4, where she talks about that.
As I realised 6 years ago on the back of menopause, and going down the rabbit hole researching after someone had noticed my son was stimming, and I'd suspected he was autistic. So I have the personal lived experience. I am that high masculine, high functioning female that's gone through menopause and has all of the typical traits that present in the workplace, and my strategies came down during perimenopause and everything like that.
And the ways you learn to compensate and maybe even overcompensate are still present, and that's one of the things that coaching does, is helps you to pull that apart so that you can do things differently. And actually, while I'm on that note, and there is quite a lot of talk about the fact that autism or ADHD symptoms or whatever get worse upon diagnosis, like the skill regression, and that's actually not true at all. What it is my equivalent, my way of my analogy for that is, it's like when you decide it's time to empty your cupboard to make it more organised, and you have to make a mess before you can put it away in the right order. That mess is what happens upon diagnosis. It's like you pulled everything out of the cupboard and everything is everywhere, and everybody can see all of your chaos, and you're maybe even showing the world your chaos and going, oh my gosh, look at me, I've just become unmasked. And it's like, well, actually, now you've got to put things back in the cupboard in a way that does work for you, having unpacked them for that exact process. So we can think that we've got this skill regression and this loss of capacity, and it's not true. It's about unboxing. It's about the fact that you opened the doors to the cupboard and you pulled it all out, and then you got to put it all back in again. And that is kind of like what's happening in the midst of all of that. Okay, so just remembering that that's one of those things. We have to revisit our experiences and understand that being unidentified or unsupported for all of that time has meant something to us, that we have learned to compensate and to overcompensate, as I say. And we have to work out who is safe enough to share that kind of understanding with, because if you share your unmasked self before you've processed everything and you are continuing to just give out all of the information, then you're going to come a cropper. So I'm going to pass you across to Sharon in episode 3, who's going to talk about that briefly.
Well, I think it took a while to sink in what that actually had meant for my life. Because I was, as I said, when I got the diagnosis, I was in the throes of the menopause thing and that hadn't been fixed. And I did some massive oversharing at work as well, which I don't think I ever recovered from. You know, I think once you've said it, you can't take it back. And when you share dark things, dark thoughts, people get a bit worried around you, I think is the best way to describe that. I don't get worried when people share that with me, but then I've done some training on it. So maybe that's what it's about. You know, I've done quite a bit of training on that kind of stuff. So, but yeah, I think it was at the time when in work it's good to talk. It's good to talk. It's good to share. There was all that message going on. I wasn't thinking straight. And
There's a price to sharing.
Yeah.
And not
price.
everybody's a safe pair of hands. Yeah. And finally knowing grief for the child who did not understand, for the opportunities that you may have lost, for the years spent trying to become somebody you were never meant to be. And there can also be a discomfort in discovering who you were underneath the strategies and the masking. And some of the things that we did that we maybe shouldn't and wouldn't have done if we'd have known sooner. Maybe some things that other people did to us that they wouldn't have got away with if you had known sooner. That is part of what goes on here. I'm going to pass you across to episode 16 and have a look at that.
I mean, that journey is huge, isn't it? And I trying to explain this to clients very early on. If you're late diagnosed, there is often a period of grief, even if we've pursued the diagnosis actively, you know, whether we've gone privately, whether we've waited for years on a waiting list, whatever approach we've taken, there is still this grief. There's a huge relief often, but then this grief and this loss of identity, and trying to then deal with that, then learning and starting to accept so that some of the masks come down, some of the layers start to drop, because it's almost like peeling an onion with the number of layers. It's like, oh, you think you've got 3 masks, give it a month, you'll have 6. But hang on, I've taken 4 off, you know, and it's like, no, I know, but there are layers here that you didn't realise that you had. And so then we're starting to hear, oh, do you know, your ADHD has got worse since you were diagnosed, or your autism has got worse since you were diagnosed. It hasn't. It's just I am learning to be more comfortable with it. I am finding then in psychologically safe spaces I can remove more of the masks and be more authentically myself, which means then I can have more energy, because masking is incredibly tiring, exhausting.
Yes, it
and
is.
So we can really learn to be ourselves, and we can play with that, because actually being our authentic selves can be a bit uncomfortable to begin with, because we've never had the opportunity to be that person.
But understanding yourself matters. And there's a big sort of like getting caught up in this whole thing that getting a diagnosis has to mean moving on to medication. That isn't necessarily so. Actually, knowing who you are, it helps you to understand what the difficulty is. And upon understanding what the difficulty is, you actually start to find ways around things. Not everyone wants medication. Not everyone will want the same support, but people deserve an answer when they need one, and they deserve to know who they are. You deserve an opportunity to understand why you spent years trying so hard and still feeling as though you're failing, and you're not failing. You are a neurodivergent person trying to operate as a neurotypical person, and that is why we have to unlearn things and unpack everything and put everything back again. I'm going to pass you through to Rachel in episode 19 now, and she will talk about that.
We want to know why. Why has this happened? Why, when I have been trying and trying and trying and trying to succeed my whole life and I keep failing, why? So what's so wrong about that? And you know, we've heard about, people that are in their 60s and 70s, they shouldn't really get a diagnosis because they're wasting the time for the youth. But there's really some...
Well, that's very ageist. That's incredibly ageist.
Exactly. But there's some 60 and 70-year-olds that are struggling with what's happened to their whole life, and they want an answer. And you know what? They might not want medication, but if they want that answer, give them the answer.
Knowledge is power. Knowledge is so much of this. And it's a gateway to thriving, in my opinion. It doesn't remove every difficulty. It does not mean we can suddenly give up being creative and create this beautiful, better life for ourselves in one fell swoop. It takes an awful lot of energy, and none of us are ever the finished article. That needs to be remembered. ADHD may be the reason for many of our struggles. Goodness knows our differences have been cast as unacceptable for long enough. But what society chooses to value is a social construct. We can struggle in some ways, but we find other things easier. My brain, for example, is an ideas machine. New ideas occur to me without effort. Literally all the time. I have new ideas all the time. My struggle actually is in sort of filtering some of those out and focusing in on the ones that I can see through to fruition. But if I followed every single idea that I had, there would be even more. But as it is, there's still too many sometimes. And I can still struggle my struggles are mostly relate to difficulties with managing time, energy, money, that sort of thing. The dysregulation of that capacity is a thing for me. Not everyone has equal access to the same abilities, just as not everyone faces the same challenges, but society isn't great at recognizing that. We are all in society a big collection of strengths and challenges. People tend to turn up proudly with their strengths whilst becoming remarkably judgmental about somebody else's challenges. You are okay. Yes, you are okay. You are also working on understanding yourself, accepting yourself, and building a better life for yourself. You may have to advocate for that. You may have to fight for the understanding, support, and opportunities you should always have had. You are entitled to thrive. We all are. Across the season, you have seen and heard many voices, and ultimately they are giving you one message. You are not alone. I hope somewhere among these voices and elsewhere in your life, you feel like you have found your tribe, because community really matters, and ADHD Wise will continue to bring you community and voices for as long as we possibly can. We will see you very soon in season 2. Thank you very much for your support so far. And just so that you know, every subscribe, every like, every comment helps us to reach more people. So I really would appreciate some level of interaction so that we can reach more people. Thank you very much. Thank you for listening to ADHD Wise Podcast. ADHD Wise exists to help bridge understanding and support for people exploring ADHD and broader neurodiversity. If you would like to know more about us and our services, please visit www.adhdwise.uk. Follow ADHD Wise UK on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, and LinkedIn. Take care, and we'll see you next time.